and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA and happy Women's Equality Day. I'm Andy Hum.
That's the day we're taping,
yes.
Not the day you're seeing it. I'm Ann Northrup with a slightly stuffy nose. Allergies, summer cold. I apologize for a little nasality.
Shall we do the headlines first or talk about last week?
First, I think we should thank our great guests last week for a very special show on long-term survivors of HIV and AIDS. They were terrific. We got a big audience response on it, and we just want to let you know that if you missed the show and want to see it, you can go to our website at gayusatv.org and catch up with that. It's well worthwhile.
And we'll tell you some more resources that are out there for folks who are long-term survivors during AIDS news.
Yes.
But in the news this week, well, the federal government raided an online male escort service, rentboy.com, including Homeland Security.
This is what the federal government is spending its time and money
Your
on.
tax dollars at work.
Completely outrageous, so we'll talk about that. And strictly coincidentally, some major LGBT organizations within the last week have come out for decriminalization of sex work and now are speaking up in opposition to this raid.
The United Nations Security Council addressed anti-LGBT violence in a meeting for the first time, particularly the execution of gay people by ISIS.
The Pope, or his designated representatives in Philadelphia, are not welcoming LGBT groups into the World Meeting of Families next month.
The murders of transgender women of color just continue to escalate.
We've been noting new cases even as we sit here preparing. We will mourn the loss of civil rights leader Julian Bond.
Yes, absolutely. And the donors to the anti-gay National Organization for Marriage in Maine in 2009 have finally been revealed.
And a few sports stars have revealed their sexual orientation, but an out gay high school basketball star was disappeared by his school yearbook and then sort of restored.
And we will give you our take on the new hit musical, Hamilton.
All right, but we start here in New York with a worldwide internet service that has been raided by federal authorities. Rentboy.com operates worldwide.
It's been around for years. They have a float in the LGBT Pride Parade.
They have almost 500,000 visitors a day around the world.
And they advertise as an escort service.
They do.
You spend some money to spend some time with someone.
Yes.
They claim not to be a prostitution service, which they, well.
Which, look, I don't think we are under the illusion that they are not a prostitution service, but so what?
Exactly.
These are adult, consensual meetings and relationships. And they have been in business for almost 20 years, quite openly and happily.
They are not sex traffickers.
That we know of.
These men sign up themselves to be a part of this service. They pay a fee, and they get to be a part of this service. They get to advertise, and people have some fun with
People who want their services go on the site and hire them for their time and companionship.
So why is this happening now after all these years? Many agencies of government involved. And part of it is, it's a $10 million business. Apparently there's $1.4 million in assets that these agencies can then acquire and split up among themselves.
I don't believe for a second this is about getting their money. This is about cracking down on sex and paid sex. And people will
Yeah,
say...
but again, why now, after all these years?
Ask Eric Holder, ask President Obama. They're the one who started all this some months ago when they sent undercover people in to investigate this. You read the complaint against this, against Red Boy, and it goes into excruciating detail about the sexual fetishes that are accommodated.
They have an award ceremony annually called the Hookies, which is held at the Out Hotel, run by Ian.
Please.
Anyway, but they went to that, and they talked to some of these. The agent talked to the guy who runs the place. I think, Jeffrey Hurant or whatever, and kind of got an acknowledgement from him that it is what it is. I mean, the service is what it is, but nobody would doubt that.
Look, this is the Justice Department and the Department of Homeland Security doing this. It's the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District, which is Brooklyn. The offices of Red Boy are in Manhattan, which is a separate district, the Southern District, but the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District did not participate in this, although Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance did, as did the NYPD. I watched these news reports, and I picked up something that really struck me. I mean, the Department of Homeland Security is cracking down on a prostitution site.
And when Occupy was occupying Wall Street, they had big cops with anti-terror unit things on their T-shirts.
But those,
it's crazy. It's all crazy.
But those were people who were attacking the financial structure and powers that be of the United States.
They're not terrorists.
Well, I agree with you, but they're a lot closer to it than redboy.com.
The question is, don't they all have better things to do?
Look, the quote from the Homeland Security guy is, this site has 11,000 Twitter followers, and that brings into play a public safety aspect. 11,000 Twitter followers. Talk to Taylor Swift.
We talk about what happens.
Talk to Kim Kardashian.
We talk about what happens around the world to LGBT people and others and the repression. We don't want to be like that here in the United States. Come on.
Well, evidently someone does. Now, is the Obama administration trying to prove its conservative credentials? Is there some pressure on them about, if sex trafficking is an issue, do they want to do sort of equal protection arrests? It's insane.
Yeah.
It is truly insane.
It is. And this week it was revealed that a lot of the LGBT groups got together with Amnesty International and called for the decriminalization of sex work. They said, look, we're against sex trafficking, but we're talking about consensual sex work. So Lambda, Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, Transgender Law Center, and the National Center for Transgender Equality all signed on to this. And they said for many LGBT people participating in street economies, was the phrase that they used, is often critical for their survival. Particularly for LGBT youth and transgender women of color.
Well, and that's the people who are selling their services. The people who are buying the services are often people who are isolated in, say, the Midwest, who are not so easily hooking up with anybody.
Right.
And why shouldn't they be allowed to purchase sex? What's wrong with that?
And what's next in this fight? Are they going to expose all the Johns who used the service and have lots of suicides, as with the Ashley Madison data dump?
The thing that annoys me about the Ashley Madison thing is, I'm not here to pass judgment on people who are having affairs or whatever, but one of the big arguments by the right wing against us and the idea of us having marriage legalized was, well, they're not faithful. They don't have monogamous relationships, as if that's the standard for anyone.
Right.
But and then they have 30 million people on Ashley Madison.
Right. Some of whom have been exposed to be GOP operatives who are
anti-gay
or Josh Duggar.
The point is that there is a hell of a lot of infidelity
And hypocrisy.
Across the board.
Right.
And to make us the scapegoats. Right. And to make us the scapegoats, evidently, for sex trafficking, when rentboy.com is about consensual adult sex.
No, it's outrageous. And we need to do something about it.
What are we going to do about this?
Let's meet. Let's have a meeting.
Well,
we know a lot of them. We know some of these people who are involved in this thing.
You know, it's bad. I mean,
the officials. So
this
we should
is something
be
I
to
might expect from the New York Police Department, but the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice in the Obama administration,
and the DA's office in Manhattan. I mean, I know Cy Vance, and we should talk to him.
And the U.S. Attorney's office in Brooklyn. It's all outrageous.
That's where Loretta Lynch came from.
Yes, it is.
So
this started under her.
She's the Attorney General. This must have been underway.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely.
Well.
So that's our biggest upset this week.
Well, and then.
But we can move on to others.
Well, should we talk about the Security Council?
Sure.
Well, this also happened in New York at the UN. They're billing it as the first ever meeting on violence versus LGBT people. We have a picture there of Samantha Power and a Syrian gay refugee, Subay Nahas, is that his name? Yes, there. So, all right.
Samantha Power is the U.S. rep to the United Nations.
Now, Eaglehurk, the International Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission, was very much a part of this. The Security Council is, the superpowers plus, rotating nations. Chad and Angola were absent from it. But so they talked a lot about what's happening in Iraq and Syria with ISIS.
The barbaric treatment of LGBT people by the Islamic State. At least 30 murdered. Thrown off of buildings, stoned to death,
but the Assad government has also accused all dissidents of being homosexual, and that sets them up for being killed by ISIS.
More scapegoating.
Scott Long, who writes about these issues, who lives in Egypt now, he called the meeting worse than useless. He says that he accuses it of causing more killing. Indeed, there were 9 more executions for the sin of the people of Lot, as they said in ISIS afterwards. The question is, what are you going to do about this? What is anybody going to do about ISIS? Nobody really knows what to do. We're bombing them over there. What's going to stop that? There was a plea on the part of Eaglehurk for take in more Iraqi, gay, and Syrian refugees, which we're not doing.
More asylum.
We're not doing that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is this all talk and no action?
Well, Samantha Power.
The action is to arrest gay people who are selling sex online.
Samantha Power called it a small but historic step.
If only.
They're talking.
Small, yes. Historic, maybe, maybe not.
Okay.
Now, there's an historic meeting scheduled in Philadelphia next month that you will have heard about and will continue to hear about. And this is the Vatican's meeting of the World Congress of Families, World Meeting of Families, whatever they're calling it.
That's what they're calling it.
Well, he's coming to the United States, and this is one of the big reasons he's coming, is to attend this meeting.
Now, I haven't heard about any protests that are planned. We protested past popes when
What are we doing about it?
What are we doing about it?
I detect a theme for this show.
Well, there are LGBT groups that wanted to participate in this, and the Archbishop of Philadelphia is stopping them from even having a table at the conference.
Well, he's the one who bragged about the fact that the elementary school fired the lesbian teacher, so what do we expect from him?
But they are allowing a booth at the fair for Courage, which is the Catholic group which encourages you, this has been around for 40 years.
Yes.
Encourages you to lead a lifetime of no sex.
Yes.
Unless you can convert. So it's not encouraging. And, the Dignity, New Ways Ministry, these groups that care about LGBT issues, they're going to do something, but
well, they tried to participate. They wanted to be there. They wanted to hold panels. They're going to do
meetings.
Sort of outside panels in the vicinity.
Don't be fooled by the hype about the Pope.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll be keeping an eye on that.
Now, all right, so we move on to some political news?
Well, I was going to move on to the horrendous list of transgender women murdered. Let's catch up with that as we didn't do news last week.
I mean, again, you hear about this from us weekly at this point, about some transgender woman, almost always of color, who has been murdered. And why are we hearing about this now? I think it's important to say that we probably didn't hear about it in the past because they were misidentified as victims and nobody cared about them.
Yep.
And now you've got people like Laverne Cox putting them on Instagram immediately when she hears about them.
Right.
So we have from Kansas City, and we have some pictures here. That is a Latina trans woman, Tamara Dominguez, murdered, 32, run over at least 3 times by an SUV.
She got out of the car, and whoever was driving the car ran her over 3 times.
A possible hate crime, the police are saying.
Yeah. Candace Capri from Phoenix, Arizona, 35 years old, shot dead.
In North Carolina, in Smithfield, Elisha Walker, 20, also a black trans woman, was found in a shallow grave, had been missing since October of 2014, and the police have arrested a guy named Angel Arias, in the murder there.
Alicia was 20.
Yes.
And more recently, we've heard about Jasmine Collins, like Tamara Dominguez, also from Kansas City, Missouri. Jasmine was stabbed to death. There have been several murders of trans women in Kansas City, Missouri.
And in Jasmine's case, a suspect has been arrested, Tia Townsell, charged with second-degree murder in the stabbing. And then in Aurora, Illinois, Kaisha Blige, this was a murder back in March 7th, shot and killed when driving with a passenger. Originally they thought it was a random attack, and now they think it was not. Awful.
In other news relevant to the transgender community, they're working on the end of the ban on military service for trans people. And Aaron Belkin of the Palm Center has written an article in the New England Journal of Medicine that says the costs of care for trans people in the military would be negligible. This is part of the ongoing examination of what ending the ban would entail. But Chelsea Manning,
Chelsea Manning is in indefinite solitary confinement for minor infractions, including a possession of expired toothpaste. I don't know what that's about.
She bought it at Fort Leavenworth's commissary.
Possession of prohibited publications such as The Vanity Fair with Caitlyn Jenner on the cover, Out Magazine, and Transgender Studies Quarterly. These are not allowed in prison?
She's actually on a 21-day restriction from being outdoors.
And these infractions add to your sentence in terms of parole or anything. It's really, they're treating her outrageously.
Yeah.
All right.
And of course, Governor Christie is laughing about vetoing the transgender birth certificate bill for a second time and described it as a proposal that was beyond the pale.
Well, let's see if Obama can come through with us on something. 130 civil rights and religious groups are asking him to reverse the Bush-era legal opinion on RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that says religious groups could not be forced to adhere to non-discrimination laws in hiring.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Well,
I don't know. I'm very cynical this week, given this rent boy thing. And the actress Ellen Page got into a fight with Ted Cruz at the Iowa State Fair over these religious restrictions. And I found his arguing points very interesting because he was mixing apples and oranges. On the one hand, he claims that people's religious freedom is being denied because they can't speak or refuse to sell cakes or whatever. But his examples are things like, this couple in the Midwest was holding weddings at a facility, and he kept referring to it as their church.
Huh.
Well, of course churches can do anything they want, but this wasn't a church. It was simply a wedding facility, and that was offering the public the chance to rent the hall for weddings.
Well, and yet Chris Christie says religious organizations should be protected, but religious people who do business should abide by the laws of the country. Now, he supports the New Jersey law banning sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination, did not say if he supports a federal bill, which is what is on the agenda if you're running for president. And how about that Donald Trump? You know, when he's being attacked by Roger Ailes, you want to take another look at him. Roger Ailes, who runs the Fox network, asking him to apologize, saying he's totally out of line. Oh my God, Donald Trump.
Trump supports the Equality Act or non-discrimination. Well, maybe.
Well,
he supports non-discrimination in hiring. John Oliver on HBO with his weekly show did a whole big segment on the Equality Act and anti-LGBT discrimination, and ended up saying that his staff had polled all the presidential candidates on whether or not they supported the Equality Act. Thank you. We've been wanting to get them to answer our questions. For support the Equality Act, Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley, Lincoln Chafee, and I'm sorry, 3 do. Ron Paul does not.
What about Hillary Clinton?
No answer. Everyone else, no answer.
Oh, come on.
Well, I think she has supported it in other venues.
And the National Organization for Marriage is trying to get the candidates to sign on to their thing that says we want a constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage, which is never going to happen. So 4 of the 17 Republicans have signed on to that. Santorum, Cruz.
Jindal and Ben Carson.
Yes. But NAM was also finally forced to reveal its donors to the Maine campaign against same-sex marriage in 2009, the referendum. This was all done by Fred Karger, pushing them to expose this, and it's finally been done. And 7 donors basically gave more than $2 million, and just one from Maine. Big donors included the Knights of Columbus and this guy, Sean Fieler Feeler, who's a hedge fund manager at Equinox Partners. He gave $1.25 million. That was a bad it was a bad investment, Sean. How are your hedge funds doing this week? Karger called them
low blow, Andy.
Karger, I'm trying to get with the news.
I know.
Karger called NAM crooks and liars guilty of money laundering. Fred sort of welcomes, you want to sue me for saying something about you? Go right ahead.
And in the same league, the Mormons made a little news this week. They have announced that they are sticking with the Boy Scouts, even though the Boy Scouts are now allowing gay people to be leaders as well as scouts. It's seen as a holding action while they set up their own system, perhaps, especially since they're a worldwide organization and the Boy Scouts in the form we're talking about operate only in the United States.
Can we give them some good news?
Sure.
In Illinois, Illinois is now the 5th jurisdiction to ban anti-gay conversion therapy for kids.
Excellent.
It goes into effect January 1st. The Republican governor, Rauner, signed it.
And he's an anti-gay marriage guy. Mm-hmm. In Kentucky, the Jefferson County Board of Education has approved a gender identity and expression non-discrimination policy for employees and students.
In Los Angeles Children's Hospital, the NIH awarded them $5.7 million for a 5-year study on long-term outcomes of medical treatment for trans youth. They're going to follow 280 of them from early puberty and to adolescence.
And in Florida, the Osceola County Commission, by a vote of 5-0, has adopted a non-discrimination human rights ordinance that includes sexual orientation and gender identity.
On the other hand, the Republican National Committee endorsed the First Amendment Defense Act, allowing anti-gay discrimination based on religious belief.
Yes, they did. And in Texas, the Supreme Court there actually did something that I think probably makes sense, although our side objects to it. They told Houston that in holding their referendum on their human rights ordinance, they have to have a straight yes or no, up or down vote. Our side had twisted it into the reverse so that you had to vote yes to repeal it or no to keep it in place on the theory that people like to vote no. But instead, this will be a much less confusing direct vote.
The city charter requires voters be asked to vote for or against the ordinance, not for or against the repeal of it. That's the law.
In LA, the sheriff's office has recommended a manslaughter charge against Caitlyn Jenner for the car crash that ended up killing someone, saying she was speeding. No word yet on whether the district attorney is actually going to prosecute.
Well, they call it misdemeanor manslaughter, which can carry a 1-year sentence.
Yes.
And they said she was going too slow. And then
driving at an inappropriate speed,
but
whatever that is.
She's negotiating for a plea deal, but it won't accept it if it includes jail time. Right. At Duke University, some freshmen objected to reading Alison Bechdel's graphic novel, Fun Home, which has been made into the hit Tony Award-winning musical, saying that nudity and themes violate their Christian beliefs. It was a summer reading book where everybody's supposed to read the same book and then discuss it during orientation week. Right. One of these young people.
Well, he started reading it and he saw scenes in a graphic novel, a comic book style, nudity and sex.
Cunnilingus.
And he said, the Bible tells me I cannot look at images like this.
Well, the Bible says you can't look at them lustfully.
Yes, exactly. Exactly, and that is the flaw in his argument.
There's a biblical injunction against lying, so you couldn't watch a political debate because that's mostly what they do during those things.
Yeah. Let's take a minute to remember Julian Bond.
Please.
Julian Bond wore many hats and was really significant, important, and wonderful civil rights leader.
Since the early 60s, when he was part of SNCC, one of the organizers of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
With John Lewis, and did all the work on all the demonstrations in the South against
Nominated for
segregation.
vice president when he was 28 years old. Couldn't accept that because you have to be 35.
Refused to attend Coretta Scott King's funeral because it was held at the church of the anti-gay but fooling with young male parishioners, Bishop Eddie Long.
Oh, yes.
Was it the anti-gay niece who arranged it there?
Bernice King.
Julian Bond said he was a raving homophobe, Bishop Eddie Long, and Coretta Scott King would never have approved having her funeral there, and he was not going to attend the funeral because of that.
Julian was also a founder of the Southern Poverty Law Center. He was chairman of the NAACP. For a long time, and he was so deeply committed to LGBT rights. He said he grew up with gay people and always had gay friends and wasn't going to turn his back on them, and said, will we have a little video of him if we could run that? That would be great, of Julian Bond.
I've been fond of saying that I don't believe there's such a thing as gay rights. They're just rights. There's not such a thing as black rights. They're just rights. And we all have these rights. And I knew too many gay people from my earlier years, my high school years, my college years, people who work with me in the movement, that I couldn't say to them, well, thanks for helping me, appreciate it, but I'm not going to help you. Of course, I couldn't say that. And so I felt bound to do it, and I did it, and I was glad to do what I could.
And Julian Bond showed up. He spoke at Creating Change in 2008. He showed up in New Jersey at a Senate hearing on same-sex marriage to speak in favor of it in 2009. He got the NAACP behind same-sex marriage and held a panel on gay things.
And you remember how hard we were pushing for President Obama to do an executive order on contractors not discriminating on the basis of sexual orientation, and we weren't getting anywhere. It was tough. He was resisting. Julian Bond did a big op-ed piece that was in whether it was the Washington Post, I forget exactly where it was, but it was a big public op-ed piece. And right after that, the thing came out, and I saw him at the NAACP convention in Las Vegas last year, and I went up to him and I said, that really, you added such a moral voice to that. And he said, oh, pish posh, yeah, I did it. He was very self-effacing in that way. I mean, he knew what his power was, and he wanted to put himself out there for things. But I think it did make a lot of difference because he was a personal friend of the president's.
And because he had moral authority.
Exactly.
And when he died, his wife said that the first person to offer condolences in the hospital was a nurse who came out to talk to her and said, I am a lesbian. And he was a hero of mine, and it was a privilege to take care of him.
And it's great that the family would acknowledge that.
And be thrilled by it.
Yes.
And his wife said that she was enormously moved by that and very grateful.
He was just totally comfortable with the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we miss him.
Very much.
It
was a brief illness, and I was surprised to see that he had died.
It was a surprise, and he was a hero, and we thank him for all the work he did.
And maybe we'll, well, who else do we have? We have, well, we want to talk about that, yes. The couple in Michigan that sued for the right to marry, we have a picture of them, April DeBoer and Jane Rouse, were married in Southfield, Michigan. The interesting thing is that the officiant who's pictured there is U.S. District Judge Bernard Friedman, who heard their case. And,
well, he's really a hero because
yes.
This case started out as an adoption case.
Right.
They adopted 4 special needs kids, 2 each, and they wanted to cross-adopt to be co-parents of all of them. And the law said they couldn't, and so they went to court to sue. And the case came up before this judge, and he said, this is not an adoption case, this is a marriage case.
Yes.
And we're turning this into a marriage question.
And they said, okay.
They were a little nervous, but that is one of the 4 cases that went to the Supreme Court and resulted in the marriage decision, the Obergefell decision. Obergefell was Ohio, they're from Michigan, but they were all part of the same case,
the Sixth
Supreme Court.
Circuit.
So he performed their wedding, which was lovely.
Now, there was a big story in the paper Times about how the Social Security Administration is still analyzing the Windsor and Obergefell decisions by the court to see who gets benefits retroactively for a lot of couples that are seeking them, Social Security benefits. So that's all still being worked out.
Well, the Department of Justice has told Lambda Legal Defense that the Social Security Administration will award benefits retroactively, that they have made that decision and that is happening momentarily. And meanwhile, in Texas, the Attorney General there, who tried to stop some kind of retroactive acknowledgement of a marriage on a death certificate, and was charged with contempt of court for refusing to follow through, is now crying to the court
yes.
and whining and saying, wait a minute, we fixed all that. Now we're following the law. Now we're acknowledging everyone's marriage. We're acknowledging everyone retroactively. Please stop prosecuting me for contempt of court.
Lambda Legal accused this guy, Ken Paxton, and his minions of an unprecedented level of arrogance, impudence, and non-compliance. That was a nice quote.
Very nice.
Anyway, he says he no longer needs judicial supervision. In Kentucky, attorneys for same-sex marriage are billing the state for $2.3 million in court costs. They're probably not going to get all that, but they're entitled to something.
Well, Kentucky is also, of course, the place where clerk Kim Davis is practicing as much civil disobedience as she can to refuse to give marriage licenses to same-sex couples. She has been ordered by a federal judge to give the licenses, although he's given her a little extra time to appeal that to a federal court.
But I like his quote. He said, "Our form of government cannot survive unless we respect Supreme Court decisions regardless of our personal opinions." And he's a conservative judge.
That's what all these issues come down to. We can all have our personal opinions, but if you take a job where you're a public servant and you're supposed to serve all the people, you should be serving all the people.
Thousands rallied for the dissenting clerks in Kentucky.
I know, in Frankfort, in the capital. She's called in sick. She's told her staff to refuse to issue the licenses.
Massive resistance. It happened in the South after desegregation orders.
Well, there are some parallels.
In Colorado, the appeals court there ruled, the 3-judge panel unanimously against the baker who did not want to bake a wedding cake for a gay couple, called it sexual orientation discrimination. This is the Masterpiece Cake Shop. In Florida, the Bureau of Vital Statistics is still refusing to list both same-sex parents on a birth certificate, leading the plaintiffs in the marriage suit there, Kathy and Carla, to bring a federal lawsuit there. So this thing isn't over. In Florida also, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is fighting paying $500,000 in court costs to the winning side in the marriage suit. In Maryland, the Attorney General there, Brian Frosh, issued a legal opinion that cheating by spouses in same-sex marriage is adultery, a fault ground for divorce, which is why he did that.
Well, that used to be a question because there was some question about whether two people of the same sex having sex was actually sex and therefore could be defined as adultery.
And if you can find fault, you see, in a divorce, it's quicker than living apart for a year and can be a factor in custody cases. So you're getting responsibilities here, folks, when you're getting married.
Back to Texas, they think that 1,000 licenses have been issued to same-sex couples since the June decision. That's in 2 months, 1,000 licenses to same-sex couples, 4% of all the licenses.
And the Hood County clerk in Texas, Katie Lang, not KD, but Katie, who denied a license and was sued by a couple, Jim Cato and Joe Stapleton, settled a federal suit for $44,000 in attorney's fees.
And Donald Trump, who maintains that he is against same-sex marriage and, is a traditional marriage guy, was asked if he'd ever attended a same-sex wedding, and he said, yes, that Jordan Roth, the Broadway producer, he's a great guy.
God.
And the Supreme Court has decided, so let's move on.
Lenny Bruce used to have a routine about white racists who would come up to you at parties and say, hey, Joe Lewis, he's a hell of a guy.
Well, that's Donald Trump.
Yes, it is. Some good news from Major League Baseball, where David Denson, 20, is the first out player on a team affiliated with Major League Baseball, the Milwaukee Brewers.
First active player.
Yes. Milwaukee Brewers farm team, the Helena Brewers in the Pioneer League. He said his teammates gave him the confidence he needed.
Well, he was a star in high school. And he went into the minor leagues. He was drafted by the Milwaukee Brewers, and he was pretty good, and he was at a sort of low but, okay level. But his performance started to decline, and they demoted him to this Helena team, still major league affiliated. But he was depressed because he was hiding. And he's only 20. But he's been struggling with being out for some years now. So he contacted Billy Beane, former player, who's out and who is now the Major League Baseball ambassador for inclusion or diversity or both or something. Yeah. Inclusion. And started talking to him.
That's great.
Directly. And Beane encouraged him to do whatever felt right to him. And so he suddenly came out to his teammates, and I think his performance is going to improve.
Yep.
Because now he is a free and happy man.
Most people say that after they come out.
Michael Sam, however, seems to have really suffered under the pressure of being the first out NFL-level football player, and he is now taken a leave from the Montreal Alouettes. He played a little in the preseason, but not much.
Yeah.
And he's having a hard time.
Your head will thank you in the long run, Michael. And in Kentucky at Betsy Lane High School, basketball player Dalton Maldonado came out after being taunted by the opposing team as a faggot. And he got support, but the yearbook left him out of a 2-page spread on seniors. He was the only one left out, so there was some kind of an insert that was developed.
Well, they got a lot of complaints because he was popular among his teammates and classmates and everybody else, and it was just the administration that had left him out of this yearbook picture. And so they created a new picture of him and put it as an insert into the yearbook, but people are still not happy. They think
banned
this is
in Kentucky.
Really second class.
The White House has appointed Rafi Friedman Gerspan to a position there. And
we have a picture of her.
There she is, an out transgender. Apparently there have been others who have worked at the White House, but this is a more ongoing appointment.
Staff appointment.
Yes.
Latina and Jewish and trans. And I'm looking, she's in the personnel office, I think. Office of Presidential Personnel.
Right.
Yeah. She's been very active on trans issues in Massachusetts, helped pass the Gender Identity and Expression Non-Discrimination Act there. Sorry to hear about what happened to Dr. Alexandra Dyer.
Oh, yes.
Who's one of these
women priests.
Yes, women
Catholic priests.
Yes.
You can chew that over, but there is a group of women Catholics.
Well, it's a sort of dissident faction that is ordaining women in defiance of the Vatican's rules. And she was the executive director of the Lower East Side Harm Reduction Coalition,
yes,
which is a very long-standing syringe exchange, anti-AIDS program started out of ACT UP and others on the Lower East Side. And she was attacked by a man on the street who threw drain cleaner in her face, and she was pretty seriously burned.
Awful.
We send our hopes for her recovery.
Well, like the horrible story out of Virginia.
Oh, yes.
You've all heard about this
As
by
we're
now.
taping today, this will be several days old by the time you hear this, but the guy who gunned down the reporter and cameraman in Roanoke, and it turns out that he had worked at the station and was described as a disgruntled employee. Well, it turned out he left a note, a manifesto of some pages, that said he was angry at being discriminated against as a black gay man. But he went on to sort of rant about how his heroes were the killers at Columbine and the guy who killed the students at Virginia Tech, and how his anger had been building, and how the killing in the Charleston church of the black parishioners by the white supremacist had set him off. And so a lot of this was about racial anger.
Awful.
Terrible story.
All right. Should we get to some international news?
Sure.
Yes. In Bolivia, President Evo Morales called for a public debate on same-sex marriage and letting the people decide.
In Ukraine, in Odessa, masked men threw smoke bombs into a gay forum. They had been wanting to hold a pride parade, but decided not to because that was too dangerous. But they were holding discussions in a private facility, and guys showed up and threw smoke bombs in there.
Dolce & Gabbana have finally apologized for trashing IVF kids. Gabbana says he'd like to be a parent, but it's tough in Italy.
Well, it is tough in Venice, where the mayor has both banned LGBT-themed children's books from schools.
47 of them.
Well, he
47 books.
He knocked it down to 2 after there were complaints. I'm not discriminating. The majority of parents are man-woman. He has also said that there will be no pride parade in Venice while he is mayor. There have been previous pride parades in Venice, but not since he's been elected.
It was great that 263 Italian authors demanded that their books be banned as well. We don't want to stay in a city where books of others are banned.
Venice would not be the first place you thought of as discriminating like that.
In Mexico, they had a nationwide gay kiss-in at the cathedrals across the country, a lot of them, in a response to protests by religious groups versus the Supreme Court. They're moving on marriage equality.
Yeah, and adoption rights. In Australia, in Melbourne, thousands turned out to rally for same-sex marriage, and more in Adelaide. And a marriage bill was introduced by someone who's described as a progressive redneck crocodile farmer. But the Prime Minister is holding firm in his anger at all these proposals, but he is going to announce his plan for a public vote on same-sex marriage.
Either a referendum or a plebiscite, which is, I guess, advisory. He's taken a tumble in the polls over this, but he's really a numbskull. But he got in because the ruling party was so corrupt at the time. In Malaysia, Prime Minister Najib Razak said he will not defend LGBT rights, said they adhere to Sharia law, and says that we are hiding behind the facade of human rights.
We are, us personally.
Yes.
But of course, this is it has a bigger stage because they are proposed as part of this Trans-Pacific Partnership trade bill, and this is now second country after, is it Burundi, that is saying we will not adhere to any non-discrimination rules that cover LGBT people. And yet they want all these favored trade status.
In Israel, the guy who stabbed and killed Shira Banki at the Pride Parade in Jerusalem is indicted for murder. He will not accept the authority of the court, and he said the Pride Parade must be canceled to elevate Shira's soul.
He's a true believer. The nephew of the president of the Gambia gave an interview. He's living in the United States, not very well. He says he's living in a car.
Well, he had a scholarship to go to school in University of California, Santa Barbara, and they pulled the scholarship because he wrote on Facebook that he supports gay rights.
Well, the scholarship was from his home country, and that's why the scholarship was pulled, not by the school.
No, of course.
And he says that he will face prison or death if he returns to the Gambia.
Well,
I think they did an online fundraiser for him, and he got some
His uncle,
money.
the president, said he wants to slit the throats of gay people. In Egypt, they have deported 5 foreign nationals since December for being gay. The courts have upheld these actions, even though gay sex is technically not illegal there, and this has given the government the power to ban homosexual foreigners, including gay people on holiday. Nice way to bring back tourism.
Well, they're hoping to bring back tourism in Cuba, where they reopened the U.S. Embassy. And at the opening, a new poem was read by Richard Blanco, the gay poet who did a poem for the Obama administration inauguration here.
In the United Kingdom, Rugby League star Keegan Hurst, 27, is the first Brit player to come out. He had 2 kids and a wife, but he says he feels free now and came out to help his wife understand why he was leaving.
Couldn't he tell her that privately? Costa Rica has proposed common law marriage for same-sex couples. You have to be together for 3 years and living together. The Supreme Court ordered recognition of same-sex couples in 2006, and the government, not unlike the government of Colombia, is just working its way around to something like this.
In Senegal, 7 men were convicted of sodomy and sentenced to 6 months in prison. The AIDS groups over there say it will hamper their prevention efforts.
In the Cayman Islands, which is a division of the United Kingdom, the legislature has voted to affirm its man-woman-only marriage rules because homosexuality is evil and a sin.
In the Philippines, a U.S. Marine there who killed a trans Filipina there is claiming a trans panic defense. When he saw the penis in Jennifer Laudy, he said they got into a fight and he choked and drowned her in a toilet bowl, but he said he was just acting to subdue her during the altercation. Then he said to a friend afterwards, "I think I killed a he/she." He said he felt violated.
Typical.
So he killed somebody.
In China, a very brave student is suing the Ministry of Education because the Chinese textbooks say that homosexuality is a treatable illness.
Do we have time for this video from Cook's Island? Maybe
we have
not.
10 minutes.
All right. An LGBT group there in the Cook's Island is pushing for decriminalizing gay sex. The UN has put out a Pacific Free and Equal campaign, and we have a video there.
It's nice to see videos from other places in the world talking about freedom and equality.
There were about 42 students. They beat me up brutally.
I was assaulted by 6 prefects of the school, and I missed an entire school term.
I've got bruises on my head. I've got slashed down in my genital area.
That was one of the worst experiences of my life growing up as a transgender individual in high school.
I knew that I was gay when I was 12 years old, but I had to keep it to myself because of the stigma in place.
Across the world, people suffer from violence and discrimination because of who they love and for who they are.
I came out to my mom when I was 19, and she didn't accept me for who I am and who I love.
Self-stigma is very high. This is one of the issues that we're trying to fight. My family keep trying to push me to be a person that I don't want to be.
Too many Pacific Islanders who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex are exposed to discrimination and violence. In 8 Pacific countries, relations between people of the same sex are even still criminalized. And yet, the unique gender diversities of the Fa'afafine, Leyte, and others are part of the Pacific's age-old cultural treasure.
I'm a proud Itauke transgender woman. The body I was born with does not determine the way I live my life. It is determined by the way I feel inside.
I had a very supportive and loving mother who saw my diverse difference in my sexuality, and she very much embraced it.
We're a couple, just like any other couple. A little bit different, but that's okay. Yeah, we've been together like 13 years. 13 years.
In the last 10 years, 5 Pacific Island states have decriminalized same-sex relations. In Fiji, we have adopted a constitutional ban on discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity. These are important steps forward, but laws alone are not enough.
I have a lot of friends who say that they support me being a lesbian, and then the next day come in and tell me that I just haven't found the right man.
We are Pacific Islanders with the same right to love, live and prosper. We are all children of God.
Rise with me and stand against homophobia, transphobia and biphobia.
Together we can build the Pacific that is free and equal.
I love it.
Me too. I love hearing voices from all over the world.
Yes, it's catching on.
Well, it's very heartwarming, and
it is.
Great to see their bravery and their, dedication.
Right.
All right, moving on to AIDS news. And again, if you missed our 1-hour special last week, the interview with the 4 long-term survivors, we really recommend you take a look at it. Go to gayusatv.org and you can find last week's show, which is very moving, enlightening.
Yep. You click on the thing for
inspiring.
this week's show and it'll take you to the archive, which will show you last week's show and all the other past shows.
Right.
And by the way, Mark Milano, who was one of the panelists, wanted us to remind everyone that ACREA, where he works, has support groups, and you can go to acrea.org/community to read about those, and also friendsindeed.org also runs these kinds of groups.
And one of the current topics here in New York about AIDS these days is the closing of local health clinics temporarily or permanently, and particularly one in Chelsea. There's going to be a town hall meeting next week on September 1st, Tuesday, co-sponsored by ACT UP and TAG, the Treatment Action Group, about the closing of the clinic and other related topics, the New York City and New York State plan to end the epidemic. That'll be at 6:30 Tuesday, September 1st at the LGBT Center on West 13th Street.
All right. Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and House members are urging the FDA to adopt a risk-based blood donation policy. They've modified the policy. Now it's like you can't have had gay sex for a year, but it doesn't take into consideration whether you really have a risk factor.
Now, again, it's stereotype,
based on status.
Scapegoating. Now I have the hiccups.
We'll get through this, though. We will get through this.
The AIDS Healthcare Foundation in Los Angeles, Michael Weinstein, the executive director, has published guidelines about prevention, PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, specifically Truvada. They've been unalterably opposed to it on the grounds that it promotes risky sex. But the new guidelines admit that non-condom using gay men with multiple partners could use PrEP.
Duh. Most of them have figured it out without you, Michael.
Exactly. They push regular testing and certainly reevaluation, but it's nice to see them coming around.
All right.
There will be a U.S. conference on AIDS in a couple of weeks in Washington, D.C., September 10th through 13th. Watch for some news coming out of that. And in reference to the long-term survivors, there is an organization that is taking on issues of long-term survivors, and they have a website called letskickass.org, ass meaning AIDS survivor syndrome, which they're examining. So check out letskickass.org.
Right.
With any luck, the federal government will not raid that site.
Entertainment news.
Yes.
Lily Rose Depp, 16, Johnny's daughter, has come out as not straight. This is part of the Self-Evident Truth campaign, which is trying to make people feel good about themselves using Instagram and other things.
Let's talk about a couple of plays you've seen.
Well, we did see, we're really looking forward to Hamilton, which is Lin-Manuel Miranda's take on one of the founding fathers. There they are.
Hip-hop musical.
Mostly played by people of color. It's a mega hit, The Rapping Founding Fathers, and it's certainly a new perspective. I found it a little hard to understand because it's told in rap, but the music was kind of overwhelming, and I missed some of the lines, which is a problem. Some people say it's a problem.
You have a little hearing problem.
No. You know, other people say it's important to sit further back. It does not deal with Hamilton's male lover, though he is featured as a beloved friend in the show. Lafayette was a little too much of a fag joke for me, really, I thought. You know, kind of epicene and everything. Jonathan Groff, out gay actor, plays George III, the king. I thought that was kind of fun. And most people
especially in his first performance.
Most people are loving it. I heard people around me coming out of the theater saying it was the best show they ever saw, but we were not as taken by it.
Well, you were more taken by it than I was because you stayed for the whole thing and you said you liked the second act a lot. I left. But I always do, or almost always do. I found the rap, you know, I like rap. I'm not opposed to rap, but I found hours and hours of it boring. It was monotone.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of variety in it. So it wore off for me as a device. It seemed to me to be just an artificial device rather than really moving the story along.
Nothing can hurt this show.
That's true.
I saw a small show called Sense of an Ending at 59 East 59th Street. This is about the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide, where two nuns who are Hutus are accused of participating in the murders of Tutsis. There were 800,000 Tutsis murdered by Hutus who felt totally justified based on the way they'd been treated over the decades. And it's supposed to be like a mystery story. You know, did they do it? Didn't they do it? A New York Times reporter was interviewing them. Some of the things he said didn't sound like much of what a reporter would say. But it's certain. How much do we think about the Rwandan genocide? So it was good to be reminded of it.
Look, we're upset about ISIS and what they're doing. What did we do about Rwanda or any number of other genocidal experiences?
So in that sense, it's good to contemplate it.
All right. Well, the credits are rolling. We again thank our guests last week. Write to andyhum@aol.com to get on our mailing list, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.